everyone, it's Kelsey from the blog Westman Academy, and today we are going to be making homemade bread from freshly milled flour. My camera keeps focusing on any type of light and pretty much background image behind me. So if I go out of focus, it is not my intention and I'm really sorry if I am blurry. I will try to keep the introduction brief. That way we can get right into the milling and the bread making. So to start off, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the wheat that I use. So when you grind or mill wheat into flour, you are going to be using what's called wheat berries. And my dad is a farmer, so I take the wheat berries from him and they come directly from the field. So when you look at my wheat berries, you might notice that there's chaff, maybe some bugs, dirt, specks. I try to eliminate that in my cleaning process. But if you are buying your wheat berries online, either from Nutri-Mill, Mock Mill, Amazon, wherever you get them, they're going to come clean. So you're not going to notice any of that in your personal wheat berries. Mine comes directly from the field, from the combine into the truck, from the truck into the buckets that I take into my house. So what I have to do beforehand, most people don't have to do because their wheat berries have already been cleaned. Cleaning equipment is super expensive, and because my dad does not sell directly to the consumer, there's no need for him to buy super expensive equipment that cleans the wheat, if that makes sense. Although I'm trying to get him into the wheat selling business, but so far that's not really his journey. So I'm just going to utilize my free wheat and just suck it up and clean it the best that I can. After I grind it, I actually sift it because my husband really despises whole wheat, and I will say that whole wheat's not my favorite. I feel like the taste has to be acquired. You have to get used to it, especially if you are starting from bleached white flour, especially from the store. So what I do is after my flour has been milled, I sift it. That way I try to make it as white as possible. I want to be able to utilize my dad's wheat because it is free to me. I did buy this mill and I enjoy this process, and I enjoy that I know my dad, how he farms, and that the product that I am bringing to the table is fairly clean, but safe and good for you. I know that he tells me about the different protein levels, and so I'm not like a wheat expert by any means, but I do thoroughly enjoy getting his wheat. So I do want to utilize the freeness and the quality of his wheat, and so I do try to make it taste as non-whole wheat as possible. I know I'm doing a lot of quotation marks. It's really hard. I have been doing a lot of whole wheat straight from the mill, just scooping the flour and using it as is, but my husband does enjoy the taste of it being sifted more. So I do sift it. You don't have to, but if you are looking for more of a homemade whole wheat flour, then sifting is a great option. I will use all of the products that I have. I will link them down below. I pretty much buy everything off of Amazon. I'm pretty sure that I bought everything for my process on Amazon, but really you just need a mill, whether it's the Nutri-Mill, a Mock Mill. I'm sure there's a ton of different mills. Mine is one of those mills, you can kind of see here, that is considered ugly in the homemaking milling community. They have some prettier mills, but I actually don't mind the look of this. I have a great place in my kitchen currently where I can store it, and I feel like surrounding it with more beautiful items, especially vintage items, really pulls it together. So I don't mind it being on my counter. The only thing that I worry about is my 5-year-old daughter has celiac disease, so I have to try to keep everything contained and a little bit more cleanly than probably the average person. So with all that being said, let's jump into the process of me milling. how the wheat bears that I will be using today, I have already cleaned. And what I do is I go outside, I have a strainer and a bowl, and my husband takes like a leaf blower and blows if it's not windy. Sometimes it's windy and the wind will do just fine. And I will literally lift up the wheat. I will dump it so that all of the berries and the grains fall, and then the wind from the leaf blower or just from the wind will blow the chaff and the dirt and other stuff out in a way. So I don't have any footage of that because I don't have to do that currently because I have already done that. I went through all of our wheat when we cleaned out our garage, and my husband and I cleaned the wheat as we were cleaning the garage. So all of the wheat that I have for milling is already prepped and ready to go for the mill. So let's jump into it. What stinks is the cord to this mill is not very long. So usually in order for me to mill, I have to turn it pretty much all the way towards the outlet down here. I can use the counter, but this area just holds our fruit and potatoes and different things. It's not really a prep space for me, and so I don't worry as much about it getting dirty for my daughter with celiac disease. So I use the Nutrigrill main grill. I absolutely love it. I have no desire currently to buy the fancier looking one. I actually like that the wheat that's stored in here is more contained, and then the newer, nicer looking ones, I guess you would say, the grain pours out from the front. And so I don't necessarily want the grain to come out the front. I like that it's more contained. So I'm very happy with this one. If you can see right here, there's a little notch, and this is just your setting for the motor. So this is going to be how finely milled it is. So you can have a thicker, coarse flour, or you can turn it all the way to the small, which I do, and get the smallest flour as you can possibly get. The feed rate is what you'll turn on, and that will activate the motor. It is kind of loud, so I'm not going to turn it on at this moment. And I just put it at a medium setting. I don't need my grain to feed in super fast. I want it to do a good job and mill thoroughly, so I just leave it on kind of a middle setting. So there's a little compartment down here, and this is where the wheat filters into. So you have a filter here, and then this little container that holds all the wheat. I don't personally clean this afterwards. I might rinse it out if need be, but I really don't want there to be any extra moisture just because I don't want mold to build, and I want the wheat to be able to just be powdery in its powder form, not touch any moisture, and then have issues there. So I have made the mistake. There is a little measurement down here, and it says no, which means no, your container is not in far enough. And then you can push it and it says yes. So I have definitely milled where it says no, and wheat will just spew out. So you want to be mindful of this. But I do really like that it's contained. It is a little bit dirty. I didn't clean this beforehand. I didn't try to make it look fancy. This is just what it is. So if we take off the top, this is what the inside looks like. It says no seeds, nuts, sugars, or spices. I have only done the wheat for my dad, but I am really looking into getting wheat from like einkorn berries, but it is expensive, and I found that the price is about the same as just buying einkorn flour. So far, I'm just going to stick with the grain. So my mom actually bought me these canisters. I already had canisters for my normal sugar and flour, but I decided that I would utilize them for wheat. So one says coffee. This is a giant thing for coffee, but one says coffee, one says flour, and then another one says sugar. So I have 3 things that I just have filled with wheat. And so I just dump this directly into here, or I have little bags of wheat that I can dump into there as well. So you can see right here what I am talking about with the chaff. You see these little pieces of chaff. So a lot of times the chaff won't fly out with the the wind because the grain is still in there. The head of grain is still in there. So if there's no head, it doesn't weigh very much and it just flies out. But if there is a head still in there, the head weighs it down. So I do go through, I try to pick out any little heads that I see. I can either remove the head from the chaff or just throw the chaff away. But I'm honestly not super concerned about it. A lot of times when I'm sifting the wheat, the chaff doesn't get sifted with it. So I'm not overly concerned about that. If I do see a bug or a speck or a dirt clump or something, obviously I will take that out. But otherwise, I am not super concerned. So what I do is I just dump the wheat directly in here. And I will go through the top part and kind of pick out some chaff that I missed. Again, I'm not super concerned about getting every single piece. Usually if there's a tail piece, I will grab it, but otherwise I will just kind of let nature take its course and just make freshly grained, straight from the field, whole wheat flour. So you can put the lid on if you want, but I want to show you kind of how the wheat goes down, so I'm not going to. So my setting is to the finely milled setting, and I'm going to just turn it on. Here is what we got for our freshly milled flour. You can see the dark spots in there, the bran, the whole wheat, where all the nutrients is, all the good things that my husband doesn't like. But it creates a pretty good amount of flour based off of how many berries that you use. So I have a container here. This is what was left. This is why I needed more flour. I still need to sift this, so I actually need to sift both of them. So now we are going to go through and we are going to sift this flour and try to make it as close to white flour as we can. So I have my mesh strainer here. I will link it down below. This is 80 mesh. And I also do keep some bran. I already have bran from when I sifted the last batch, so I'm not going to keep any bran from this batch, but I will show you how I sift it and try to make it as close to white flour as possible. So I have my bowl right here. This I bought on Amazon. It is the largest size. I will link it below. And this actually fits perfectly on top. So there was some already sifted through flour from my last batch. I just left it on the counter, and now I'm just going to add more. The less that you add, the easier it's going to be to sift through. Here is our freshly milled flour. And then here is our freshly sifted flour. So you can tell there's not as many dark spots, the bran is gone. I can't say it's 100% gone, but a good chunk of it is gone. A lot of the excess parts of the head of wheat. And this process has taken me, or will take me, probably 30 minutes from start to finish, just with the amount that I put in that grain mill. So the sifting does take a little bit longer. If you don't want to sift and you want to use whole wheat, then this process is going to be very fast and easy for you. And that's what I was doing for a while. I would just store the flour exactly like this. So I'm going to be using the homemade bread recipe from my 4-week meal plan. You can find this available on my website for $5 at westmanacademyhomeschool.com. I know, even though I make bread all the time, weekly at least, sometimes multiple times a week, I generally have it memorized, but I do like to have it in front of me just in case. So I'm starting off with 2 tablespoons of dry active yeast. And then I'm going to be adding 1.5 cups of warm, fairly hot to the touch water. I just use it from the faucet. You just want to make sure that it's not boiling, because if it is boiling, then it will kill the yeast. And if it's not warm enough, the yeast won't activate. Then I am taking 1/3 cup of vegetable oil. I'm also going to be adding 1 egg, mixing it together, and then adding 1/2 cup of sugar. If you like your bread to be a little less sweet or don't want to add as much sugar, you can always do a 1/4 cup. I don't find that the bread is overly sweet to where it tastes like a sweet bread or sweet roll or sweet dough, but I know that not as many people like to add sugar. So I do add 1/2 cup, and then I am doing 1 teaspoon of salt. I'd like to use a Danish whisk and whisk all of the ingredients together. After that, I add my flour. I add 4 cups initially, and on the recipe you will notice it says 4 to 5. Whether you're using a hand mixer, a stand mixer, or kneading by hand, that is when I will slowly add in that last cup of flour. You may use more, you may use less, until you get a very smooth consistency. Whether I use a stand mixer or knead the dough by hand, I always place the dough on a flat surface and tuck the bottom under while turning the dough to create a smooth ball. I will then place the dough back into the original mixing bowl I was using and allow it time to rise in the oven at 95 degrees. I let my dough rise roughly 2 hours or until it has doubled in size. Dough has doubled in size, I remove it from the edges and I either place it directly into a bread pan and bake 1 giant loaf, or as you see me doing now, I cut it into 2 pieces and I tuck it under using the same method, but make more of a loaf-shaped bread. I will place it back into the bread pans that I'm using. I love to use cast iron, and I will let it rise again in the 95-degree oven for roughly 30 minutes or until it has reached the top of the pan. I like to place parchment paper into my loaf pans. This just helps with cleanup and really helps the edges of the bread so that they don't stick to the actual loaf pan. I also place aluminum foil on top of the loaves before I bake them. This helps from the top from getting too brown or burning. It helps to give it a soft touch on the top and keep it golden brown. I did run out of aluminum foil for my second loaf, so I tried to use parchment paper, but it did not work as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you are able to learn something and be able to make and mill your own bread at home. If you would like step-by-step instructions or to find the bread recipe, you can find a whole blog post going over everything we talked about at westmanacademyhomeschool.com.